Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world, and a very happy International Women's Day. On behalf of Women's World Banking, the World Bank, the Better Than Cash Alliance, and the United Nations Capital Development Fund, welcome to Reaching Financial Equality for Women, a call to action. My name is Professor Claudine Moore, and I'm absolutely delighted and honored to be your moderator today. And I want to thank you all for joining us. Everyone around the world has felt the negative impact from the pandemic, but women in particular have borne the brunt of the economic impact of COVID-19. And we're now faced with the absolutely alarming statistic that this year there are 247 million women in extreme poverty. Today, we'll be discussing a 10-point action plan for governments and businesses to rebuild stronger after COVID-19 by prioritizing women's digital financial inclusion. This is one of the most critical issues of our time. And to highlight this, we have convened an incredible panel of not one, but two G20 finance ministers and a central bank governor, alongside the United Nations Secretary General's Special Advocate and a representative from the Huairou Commission. I have no doubt we're going to have a fantastic session with these global leaders sharing their experiences and challenges, as well as outlining the actions they will be taking to achieve financial equality for women. But before I introduce our very first speaker, some housekeeping. So please note that this event is being recorded. You'll also notice everyone's mics are muted and the cameras are off. This is intentional to keep the focus on all of our speakers today. If you experience any technical issues, please send an email to the email in the chat. And finally, this is an interactive event, so we really encourage you to ask questions. To do this, please click Q&A on the bottom of your screen to submit questions to our experts who are all standing by, and they will do their absolute best to answer all of your questions. I would now like to introduce Her Majesty Queen Máxima of the Netherlands in her capacity as the United Nations Secretary General's Special Advocate for Inclusive Finance for Development. As Special Advocate, she is the leading voice on advancing universal access to and the responsible usage of affordable, effective, and safe financial services. Queen Máxima raises awareness, serves as a convener, and supports actions to expand financial inclusion at a global and country level, in close collaboration with partners from the public and private sector. Over to you, Your Majesty, Queen Máxima.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Ladies and gentlemen, it is really a pleasure to join you today. And I'd like to first recognize our esteemed co-panelists, Minister Indrawati, Minister Herrera, and Governor Addison, and really thank you for your leadership on financial equality. International Women's Day is a day for us to not only reflect upon a common progress, but outline what needs to be accomplished next. Frankly, the outlook is sobering. According to UN Women, 47 million more women and girls worldwide have fallen into poverty since the start of the pandemic. That pushes the overall total to 435 million women and girls living on less than $1.90 a day. Mothers and daughters everywhere continue to shoulder the extra costs of this crisis. Women usually have to assume additional caregiving responsibilities while struggling to maintain their livelihoods, often in the informal sector. Female-owned businesses tend to be smaller, with less access to financial resources. And data from Africa, South Africa, and Latin America show that women have lost their sources of income more rapidly than men because of the economic disruption caused by COVID-19. However, the news is not all bad. Many governments responded to the crisis by providing funds to citizens through digital channels. According to the IMF, cash transfers make up more than 80% of relief programs in sub-Saharan Africa since the pandemic began. This response has afforded new opportunities to accelerate financial inclusion. Digital deployment offers the opportunity to deposit funds directly into women's accounts. This pivots away from cash, which can be unsanitary, and it provides women more control and privacy. It can also enable massive account openings, paving a path to explore other digital financial services, such as remittances. Using these financial services helps women build assets, manage economic emergencies, and weather health shocks. It is important that appropriate and affordable products are designed considering the financial needs of women. Beyond short-term access, usage of financial products is a priority, particularly savings and insurance, to build up buffers. Reaching full financial inclusion for women, however, cannot take place without investing in digital public goods. It is impossible to send cash safely and swiftly to a woman who has no formal identification, does not appear in public databases, or has no access to a mobile phone with a secure internet connection. It is therefore now more important than ever to accelerate investments in this infrastructure to help women enter and participate in the formal digital economy in a very safe manner. What do I mean specifically by such goods? Many of them are outlined in the call to action. 1. Access to a mobile phone and internet connection is a necessary starting point. In general, developing economies have notable gender gaps in this area. Beyond basic access, people need reliable and affordable data and connectivity to use financial services on mobile phones. The problem is particularly acute in sub-Saharan Africa, where there's a 41% gender gap in mobile internet use. This, while the region is home to 4 of the world's top 5 most expensive countries for mobile data. Second, people without a government-recognized ID often cannot open accounts and are excluded from the formal financial system. Globally, 1 of 5 unbanked women say the lack of ID is a key barrier to opening an account. And lastly, regulation promoting responsible digital innovation and agent network development is crucial. There are many good examples of countries modifying regulation to support pandemic response. Governments can require that financial service providers clearly disclose product terms and conditions and ensure that there is an effective redress mechanism to address customer complaint. Without these elements in place, there's danger of expanding the digital gender divide. The Better Than Cash Alliance, United Nations Capital Development Fund, Women's World Banking, and the World Bank should be commended for developing a practical, action-oriented framework supporting financial equality. All action points in the report are equally important to make meaningful progress. Taken together, the policies outlined prioritize women's financial well-being and financial health. They also support economic growth by ensuring greater participation of women in formal markets. This is particularly relevant as countries chart their recovery from COVID-19. What is needed now is a common commitment and investment from economic actors to drive equality in a post-COVID-19 world. I encourage policymakers to develop national plans to implement the actions outlined in this report. These plans could be backed by stringent reporting and accountability frameworks with results closely monitored. Coordinated actions from CEOs, ministers, policymakers, and civil society are needed to implement this successfully. Finally, I leave you with a message of optimism. While the last 12 months significantly transformed our economies and societies, sometimes in devastating ways, digital technology has provided an important lifeline. It has offered new opportunities to accelerate financial inclusion. Milestones that appeared years away were reached in months. So looking ahead, we know what needs to be done in terms of policy of investments to close the gender gap. There is a chance to reach financial equality and set a shining example for other economic sectors. I really look forward to supporting all of you in this journey towards a more inclusive world for the women of today and tomorrow. Thank you very much, and I wish you all success.
Thank you, Your Majesty, Queen Máxima. And with that message of commitment and the need for bold and swift action, I would like to introduce our very first panelist. Economist, tough reformer, fearless. These are just some of the terms associated with our first panelist today. It's our great honor to introduce Dr. Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Her Excellency, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. In her 2 stints as Finance Minister, Dr. Sri Mulyani is credited with many achievements, including reinforcing Indonesia as a nation of economic credibility, financial stability, and integrity. Among her many accolades, she was also recognized as Best Minister in the World by the World Government Summit. Welcome, Dr. Sri Mulyani.
Thank you, Claudine. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for a very generous introduction.
You're welcome. It's great to see you. Our second panelist is Arturo Herrera, the Minister of Finance and Public Credit of Mexico. He previously served as the Deputy Minister of Finance and Public Credit, and also as the Acting Deputy Minister for Revenues. In his professional career, he has held positions at the World Bank, the private banking sector, and the government of Mexico City. Welcome, Minister Herrera.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Glad to be here.
It's excellent to have you here, sir. So finally, for the second term as Governor of the Bank of Ghana, our third panelist is Dr. Ernest Addison. Governor Addison has been praised for the bold measures he took to reform the financial sector in Ghana, which strengthened governance and supervision and repositioned the financial sector to support growth. I'd like to welcome Governor Addison.
Thank you very much, Claudine. I'm happy to be part of the webinar.
Thank you for joining us. So this is absolutely fantastic that we have all of you here today, and thank you so much for joining us. Now, without further ado, as this is International Women's Day, I think it's only appropriate that we start with Minister Sri Mulyani. And this question is for you. COVID-19 has disproportionately negatively affected women and girls around the world. UN Women estimate at least 47 million more women and girls will fall below the poverty line this year. And the World Bank data indicates that nearly 200 countries have planned or introduced more than 1,000 safety net payments for vulnerable populations. The digitalization of these payments is a proven way to boost financial inclusion and help these women. What has and is Indonesia doing to digitalize government social benefits as a key action point in the report?
Well, thank you so much, Claudine, for the first question. We all know that COVID-19 is really affecting the people, both men and women, and especially for women, because COVID is also especially related to the health and also affecting many of the education activity in which women is actually the most dominant player or labor in there. So for Indonesia, when we see the COVID hit the country, it definitely is going to require a lot of support on a health sector, especially in how we are going to make sure that there is adequate testing, tracing, and treatment. And then now we are going to the vaccination. But we also know that the COVID is different from the financial crisis back in 2008, 2009, or 97, 98 ASEAN financial crisis, in which at that time, it was more on the banking or financial sector. COVID really make people cannot mobilize or cannot interact, and that's definitely kill many of small, medium enterprises activity. And that's why for Indonesia, with the COVID, we increase or almost doubling our social protection spending. And this is especially to protect family, the most vulnerable one, that is 40% bottom of the family in Indonesia. But also we provided support for the internet use for students and also teachers. And also we provide discount or support subsidy, full subsidized electricity for a very poor household. So these are all what we call it the support from the government, because we know that the COVID is not only affecting their economic activity, it's also creating a huge burden at the household level. And that means woman is going to carry most of that burden. So your question regarding what the government was and is doing in order for us to digitalize it. I think this is also one of the characteristics of the COVID, that we suddenly have to change into the digital transformation, both from the government, and because we cannot work from office, we have to work from home. So everything should be then interact using the internet. The same thing is also for the economic activity. So many of the activity have to then change into the digital platform. So for us, this is a very important opportunity, maybe an opportunity in a lifetime, how we are going to then converting some of the social program, which is not yet digitalized, to become digitalized. The first challenge is, of course, data. And that's why during this COVID, we sometimes have to accept that you are not having a completed and perfect data, but we are going to be able to then improve it when you start using this digital technology. And that goes for not only the social protection, but we also support directly for many of the small, medium enterprises, which is 53% owned by women, and 93% is actually their labor is a woman. So this is a very, very important one. How we are going to use it? First, I think on a social protection, the one which is already digitalized, that is for the bottom 10 million people, we've already put it within the digital data. The other one, which is related to the additional 10 million, that is the 20 million bottom of the family, we also put it that in the digital and non-cash payment. Now we are adding up additional 9 million, so we have 29 million. Not all of them can be converted immediately to the digital payment because the infrastructure not always available, as well as the access to the banking or fintech. And that's why for us to be able to digitalizing, or in this case to convert in a more complete infrastructure, is going to be very critical. And then on the small and medium enterprises, the first that can be easily targeted to support by the government is the one which is already in a banking system. We all know that small, medium enterprises hit hard by this COVID. For the informal sector, because they no longer can open, even in this case, selling many of their merchandise or food, beverages around the school area, this no longer cannot actually open when we have this COVID, in which there is no school activity in the school area. And that's why the government focusing on how we are going to support the small, medium enterprises. As I said earlier, the SME, which is a client of the bank, is going to hit hard. And that's why we provide them with the restructuring scheme. And also adding up to that, we put additional subsidy for their non-interest payment, that the interest that cannot be paid because they cannot get the income earned during this COVID. So we provide that for the 9-month periods, and now we are extended into another 6 months. The second one, we also see that many of the informal sector, the small, medium enterprises, they are the one who cannot getting the income earned as well as access to finance. And that's why the government then decided, on top of the small, medium enterprises support through the restructuring plus the subsidy on the interest rate, we provide them with the additional cash as their capital. So this is the initial cash transfer, is quasi social protection, but it can also be used as the initial capital or additional capital for many of the small, medium enterprises, which is hit hard. With that scheme, we are able to actually increase 15 or 9 to 15. This is now, it's depend, but we've already have the 9 clean data of many of the informal sector who used to be not having the access to the banking. With this transfer, non-cash, we open them the account, then they are immediately have the account. We are now expanding into 15 million, and we try to expand, especially in 2021, this kind of support. Many of the survey that we conducted for us to be able to know whether this kind of measure really benefiting the people, especially the family on the bottom 40, I think have a very encouraging result. For example, the bottom 30% in terms of the income, in terms of the consumption, household consumption, they are at least almost similar to the pre-COVID situation, meaning that all this 30%, they are protected by the government. The one which is maybe hardest to achieve is actually on the middle, lower income household. The second one on this social protection, quasi-capital support for the small, medium enterprises, we also see a very encouraging result of the survey. That means that many of the small, medium enterprises use this government support for their additional capital, or in this case, surviving their small, medium enterprises activity. Some of them even use this government support to pay for their staple goods, especially for their family. So at least this is really relieving and supporting very many of the small, medium enterprises as well as the lower income household.
And I think sorry,
yeah.
and I think that's very different. If I could just interrupt there, and I think that's really important and key to what you said. And one of the things that you mentioned that I think is very powerful is that this is an opportunity for a lifetime, and we have to get this right. And I think that brings me onto my next question, if I could, for Minister Herrera. As Minister of Finance and Public Credit for one of the largest G20 countries, why is financial equality essential for COVID-19 recovery and growth?
Thank you, Claudine. And it looked like a lifetime when we were living before COVID-19 conditions. And at that time, if I may so, we have identified 2 major economic problems in Mexico. One was the lack of a meaningful growth, and the second one was inequality. And it was inequality along several dimensions. 3 of them were inequality among social groups, inequality among regions, and inequality among gender. So these were already key issues. And let me just give you a couple of numbers. When you talk about financial inclusion, we only had 37% of the population having a saving account. That's way below some of our traditional peers like Argentina and Brazil, but also below countries like Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador, which typically have less resources than Mexico. Another one was in terms, and a very painful one, was in terms of gender inequality. In Mexico, depending if you take the numbers of the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, or the International Labor Organization, all of them report women participation of less than 50% of the population. Now, one could think that this is a cultural issue that you could assume it's happening along Latin America, but the sad truth is that this is also below some of our peers. For example, if we happen to have the female participation of countries like Colombia or Argentina, there will be around 3 million more women which work which will be actively working on the labor force. So that's not only an issue related to inclusion and equality, but it's also a lack of opportunity for growth. Now the question is, how do we do it moving forward? And as vaccination, the vaccination role is providing us a path out of the pandemic. What we shouldn't regard this is just as 2020 being just an impasse year. We have to be able to do it better. And there are two reasons why it's important to do it in a different way. The first one is because one of the very few things that positive things that COVID brought is a sense of collective responsibility. The idea that we have to solve things together, and that's the way to do it. The second one is that the effects were asymmetric. As it was mentioned both by Sri Mulyani and by Queen Máxima, women were much more affected during COVID conditions. So this is clearly an issue which we have cared before that, but it's more urgent now than ever. That's why issues related to financial inclusion are relevant to Mexico in general, but issues related to financial inclusion and gender are key for a better development of the country. Thank you, Claudine.
Thank you. And I think one of the, you mentioned there that one of the positives is the notion of collective responsibility. We're all in this together. And I think the fact that we've convened all of you from all different parts in the world speaks to that collective responsibility and the fact that collectively we're in this together and we have to get through this together. So thank you for that. So then my next question, is to Governor Addison. One of the action points from the report is appropriate financial products for the life cycle and changing financial needs of women, from adolescent girls to adult women. In light of this, and considering the exceptionally youthful population across Africa and in Ghana, where the average age is around 20 years old, what is the Central Bank of Ghana doing specifically to facilitate financial empowerment of young women in particular?
Well, thank you very much, Claudine, for that question. First, let me thank the United Nations Capital Development Fund, the Better Than Cash Alliance, and the Women's World Banking for the opportunity to be part of this webinar. I wish you all a happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
Now, on your question on what the Bank of Ghana is doing to design appropriate financial products for younger women. First, to say that Ghana has a very vibrant financial technology industry with very many talented young people. The government has passed a new Payments and Services Act, under which the Bank of Ghana has set up a FinTech and Innovations Office, which is working with many of these financial technology providers to provide products that are appropriate and affordable and helps address this question of financial inclusion. First, one of the products that we recently licensed was the remote account opening, which allows younger people to be able to open bank accounts without walking into any the traditional banking halls, which are not really very friendly to women and young girls in particular. So young people and women, for that matter, can remotely open bank accounts from anywhere. Secondly, we have been also licensing digital microcredit, which allows young people, again, women in particular, to be able to access credit without walking into any banking halls. And these credits are available. You do not need any guarantors. There are no application fees associated with it. All you need is a mobile money account and some form of identification, and then you're able to access credit, microcredit using your mobile phone. Another very interesting product that we have licensed recently has to do with chat banking. This is the facility that allows the use of WhatsApp, for example, to be linked to a bank account. And these are products that are very appealing to very young people. And especially we think that it helps the younger women to be able to access financial services without necessarily walking into a traditional banking sector. Ghana is one of the first countries in sub-Saharan Africa to also introduce the universal QR code. Now, what the universal QR code does, it harmonizes QR code payments for merchants. So you can pay for merchant services either from your mobile phone or from your bank account or from your debit card to merchants that are primarily dominated by informal workers, women who are selling food by the roadside, women who are selling cloth. All the traditional payments can now be effectively, in a sense, made using this QR code. So this is really using financial technology to improve financial inclusion and access of young people in particular to the financial sector.
Thank you, Governor Addison, and that's really incredible. Using, swapping out traditional payments and using QR payments. I mean, that's an excellent use of technology and something that's easily adapted as well globally as well. So that's really interesting to hear. And I'm sure we can go over that more later on. So just a reminder to our audience, this is an interactive session. So if you do have any questions, which I'm sure you do, excuse me, if you do have any questions, do be reminded that we do have, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your question. We have a panel of experts, a series of experts behind the scenes, as well as in front of the camera, but behind the scenes, we do have our experts who represent the organizations who are hosting this event, and they're on standby to answer all your questions as best as they can. So do ensure you ask as many questions as you like. So now I'd like to open up these questions, and my next questions are for all of the panelists. And I'm acutely aware of the time and that everybody wants to hear from everybody. So if we could keep your responses as concise but as full as possible in terms of the information that we give to our audience. So this is open to all of you. So what are some of the unique challenges facing women in your respective markets that has been exacerbated as a result of COVID-19? And how are you leveraging digital financial services to overcome these challenges and ensure digital financial inclusion? You've all kind of gone over that briefly, but it would be great if we have some more details into that. So if we start with that first question to Minister Shri Mulyani.
Well, before the COVID, I think women also have a condition which is not equal to men in terms of the access to finance. They have a much harder for accessing capital, both especially from the banking or formal financial institution. They also less financially literate, especially also when you combine with the digital technology, it's even more the condition which lag behind. This case with the COVID, that's they are hit hard, especially in terms of the access to market. So when we all understand that with the COVID and with the constraint to interact physically, then you have to go digital. then this becomes an increasing challenge for a woman. So how we are going to actually then help the woman in order for them to be able to, of course, have the access of the capital, the understanding financial literacy, and have the skill to understand the digital application, and then they are going to be able to use it. I think these are all the challenges that we are facing. For us, as I mentioned earlier, we are supporting through the existing, which is already a client of the bank, that they are, in order for them to receive the government support, then they will be able to then get the access of the capital or restructuring of their lending, including the subsidy of the interest. We are also establishing a holding company for the microfinance, which will increase the access of the ultra micro or very small company to access capital with a lower interest rate from the 15 million client into almost 28 million. And that is something that we will combine with how we are going to introduce the financial literacy as well as understanding of the digital application. I think these are all what we are trying to do in order for us to help women, especially in order for them to be from the very beginning left behind on this access comparing to men. Now we use this COVID situation in introducing a program that is allowing them to catch up. And I think this is one of the most important ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Sri Mulyani. And I think one of the common themes that we're all hearing from each of you is, the issue of access, and the issue of access as being a key part of equality, financial equality for women around the world. The same question to Minister Herrera, please. How are you leveraging? Sorry.
Please go ahead. You were saying something.
Yeah, the same question to you, Minister Herrera. How are you leveraging digital financial services in Mexico to overcome these challenges and ensure women's digital financial inclusion? You did go over some points earlier, but it'd be great to hear some more examples.
Yeah, thank you. As it was mentioned before, COVID has an asymmetric impact on both economic and the society. Those sectors which are more contact intensive were much more affected, and women in Mexico tend to work much more frequently in works which are more difficult to perform online than men. So in that sense, first, it was a first impact. The second impact is very well known, but is slightly more indirect. As the schools were closed and classes were taken online, that demanded that at least one of the parents stay at home to take care of the kids and making sure that they were studying. Very often, that responsibility fell into the hands of women. So you have two impacts going on the same direction. So what we were doing and what are we trying to do now? There are two main lines about our work in terms of digital inclusion to close that gap. The first one is, luckily enough, we started a series of programs to try to train women in electronic retail, etc., before COVID. So that they could start introducing themselves in a much better position in the economy. We have first results of that, and we plan to be working on that. The second one is, I think it's about adoption. We have been working very hard in terms of having the legal infrastructure for digital payments and having the physical infrastructure for digital payments. But it seems that people are slightly slower in terms of using them, even if they are available. So now I think also we still have some challenges in terms of the physical infrastructure, in terms of the very last mile for some communities. Is more about campaigns about how to use it. And one very relevant issue for us that I may want to highlight. We have a very large program of schools rehabilitation in which basically an in-kind transfer is done, money is transferred for the parents' associations. A policy of the government is that we would like, although the parents are welcome to organize themselves, we would like preferably that the treasurer of the parents' association will be a female. And there are several reasons why we push for that. One is that we consider that they are more responsible in managing the financial resources. And that also comes from actually hard data. When we look to delinquency rates, women are 5% less frequent to default on a loan than male. And they also tend to be better at managing resources for collective goods. So let me stop here, Claudine.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Minister Herrera. And Governor Addison, the same question for you. How are you leveraging digital financial services to overcome some of these challenges and ensure women's digital financial inclusion? You mentioned the QR codes previously, but it would be great to hear more.
Well, thank you very much, Claudine, for this question again. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic had very significant impact on, as my colleague said, on the contact services that are dominated by women. The impact of the crisis in terms of the lockdowns and the job losses that we have seen has had a higher incidence in terms of how it affected women. As you know, in our various households, when schools are closed, that means that the women are the ones that are impacted most because they have to provide childcare services. In the same way, women are affected in terms of when they are sick members of the household. It's the women that have to put in more work in order to cater for sick members of the family. So yes, the nature of the pandemic and the need to observe social distancing and all of the lockdowns had also meant that a lot of economic and financial transactions had to be done differently. And this is where the digitization of payments becomes very key. During the period, we recognized that a lot more women were using mobile money as a form of payments. We saw a significant increase in mobile money transactions. One of the things that the central bank did was to set a threshold, which is around $20, for which mobile money transfers could be made without charge by the mobile money service providing companies. And that allowed a lot of transactions which would otherwise have been done using cash, move into the electronic money space. In addition to that, we have introduced the tiered KYC requirements for different types of mobile money wallets. So for the basic mobile money wallet, for example, up to a limit of about 100 cedis, you probably don't need to provide any identification. And then as you go higher up in terms of the amount of monies that can be kept in a mobile money wallet, then you would have the standard identification requirements of the passport. One of the other interventions that we had in Ghana were cash transfers from the government to help households deal with COVID. Fortunately for us, we have the financial infrastructure which allowed for these cash transfers to be done digitally using a biometric e-card that the central bank had also introduced. In addition to that, there is also the livelihood empowerment payments that the government also did using this mobile money infrastructure. So essentially, then also the issue of the SME microfinance and SME support services, which were also dispersed electronically. So financial digitization, in a sense, has been the key approach to solving this matter.
Thank you, Governor Addison. So I'm acutely aware of the time, and we only have a short time left. And there has been, we've discussed, and each of you have shared your challenges and also some of your existing initiatives. But the purpose of this event is to launch a call to action. And there can be no significant impact without real, targeted, and strategic national actions. We need the implementation of actions from policymakers like yourselves, as well as accountability, and the accountability portion is key. So what actions, what important actions are you taking to achieve digital financial equality in line with this report? And let's start with Minister Herrera, if we may, with that question.
Thank you, Claudine. There are two issues I want to highlight. First
And
one is...
sorry, for Minister Herrera, sorry to interrupt you, Minister Herrera, but before we go through this question, I'm going to give everybody a minute to respond because we're running short of time. So if all the panelists could just be aware of the time as you give your responses. Thank you, Minister Herrera.
Thank you. I start running my stopwatch to make sure I'm
Thank you.
In that minute, I want to stress two things. First one is the central bank developed a payment system, which is basically a mobile system, a non-touch from phone to phone. Now, the challenge is about how to use it, and it's a matter of adoption. And I think what we would like to do is, one, the vaccination rollout start moving forward. We will try to do it in small communities and medium-sized cities to make sure that this could be actually implemented successful. The second one, and let me just be very quickly about that, is about continually pushing the issue of awareness. So let me, in a country like Mexico with this level of inequalities, people tend to think that this is a countryside problem. But just let me give you just one number. We have 47 commercial banks in Mexico, which you would include the top banks in the world. And out of the 47, only one have a CEO, which is a woman. Out of the 47, only one has a president of the board of the bank. So this is an issue that is happening in all the sectors and all the levels, and we need to keep making sure that everybody is aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Herrera. And yes, the issue of women in leadership is an important one. So thank you for mentioning that. And the same question to Minister Sri Mulyani. This event's about action. In sort of 1 minute, could you let us know what important actions are you taking in Indonesia to achieve digital financial equality?
Well, to be equal, then you need to have an access. And for Indonesia as a big geographically, then you really need to put the infrastructure, especially for the poorest region, the one which is not having an access yet. So we increase our budget in order for us to be able to increase the infrastructure for the internet connection. So infrastructure is important. Second one, switch the existing program into digital. So like social program, subsidy, payroll, they can be easily then moved to the subsidy. Third one, building responsible ecosystem. In this way, know your customer, the QR system which is provided or built by Bank Indonesia, Central Bank, interoperability, data protection, privacy. The fourth one is financial literacy. I think education, especially for the woman, to get and to understand the digital, as I mentioned earlier, I think is very critical. And then the fifth one, which is very important, is of course the legal framework that is adjusted to the digital challenge and the safety. Yes. I think this is very important, especially for the consumer data protection. I think they are all very critical because we see so many victims from this digitalization. It's not always a good positive story. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Minister Sri Mulyani, thank you. And the same question to Governor Addison.
So thank you, Claudine, on the issue of the actions that we are taking to enhance digital financial equality. I think a key part of it is data. Yes. So what the central bank is doing, we currently have a new online regulatory analytics and surveillance software, which is geared at providing disaggregated data to allow us to be able to assess the financial equality problem and be able to analyze it even at the regional level, and therefore help the central bank to design more gender-sensitive policy interventions. Secondly, as my other colleagues have said, we are also strengthening the digital infrastructure in order to be able to improve access, particularly of women, through the mobile money interoperability. Recently, we have issued guidelines for crowdfunding, which allows groups to be able to raise resources towards specific objectives. And women's groups are some of the groups that are benefiting from this new crowdfunding guidelines that the central bank has issued. And last but not the least, in terms of women's representation in decision-making, I have a deputy who happens to be a woman and ensures equality of financial assets at all our important meetings in the bank, in terms of our top meetings, and then on the board of the Bank of Ghana. And we think that all of these actions are critical to enhance financial equality.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Addison. So in looking at and just reviewing what each of you have said, just taking some of the points out, Minister Sri Mulyani, you mentioned, the importance of the legal framework. Minister Herrera, you mentioned the importance of leadership, and Governor Addison, of the many things you mentioned, data was key. And when the audience members, when you go through the report, you'll see that those comments really align with action point number 3, action point 7, and action point 6. So when you've finished this event, I'm sure you'll all go and download the report to see more details behind those actions that the ministers and the governor have outlined. Now for our closing remarks, I would like to go to Ms. Prema Gopalan, a global advisor to the Herrera Commission and founder of SSP, an Indian NGO that supports rural women, entrepreneurs moving from margin to mainstream with entrepreneurship skills, finance, and markets. Over to you, Ms. Gopalan.
Thank you so much, Claudine. A good day to everyone, speakers and colleagues. I'm Prema Gopalan, a senior advisor in the Huairou Commission, a social movement of grassroots women's groups across 45 countries. I am really pleased to offer the closing remarks today and the importance of building political will and partnership with those who need it most, the grassroots women groups and other stakeholders, to achieve our aim for financial and digital equality. For the women at the grassroots that I work with in SSP India, they have been affected by the pandemic and by poverty. This call for financial equality is absolutely relevant and urgent, as they need support with digitized platforms to access social protection benefits. As entrepreneurs, they need affordable credit and e-commerce platforms. All this, in our context, should help the entry of more than 200,000 rural women entrepreneurs to enter collectively in emerging markets and distribute clean energy, water, and green products in India. Recently, the Women's Innovation in India, after COVID, created a digital and financial inclusion strategy that all of you would be very interested in hearing. It paved a way for 100,000 women farmers when produce markets were shut down everywhere because of the lockdown. These women farmers calculated that they could use a group strategy to start a group business to produce and ship seed packets instead of harvesting their crops, which had nowhere to go. Similarly, in Turkey, women producer cooperatives used e-commerce tools to sell their seasonal vegetables and artichokes, and the demand and the price were at a peak. Their high profits helped to offset the economic distress that these families have been facing. Esteemed speakers here before me have said reaching financial and digital equality into the DNA of governments and private sector is so central to rebuilding our economies, our industries, and for social protection programs. After all, our aim is to truly empower women and build a more sustainable economy. Financial and digital leaders gathered here, I would sincerely urge you to work with aggregating women's networks like ours, grassroots women networks, to co-design strategies and products which are more affordable, which grow women's businesses and connect them to better markets and value chains. As a champion of these issues for over 30 years, I have dedicated my life to advancing women's access to productive and economic resources. Please join us in this global advocacy campaign to commit to one or more of the actions recommended so far. As key stakeholders, we can halve the gender and financial divides in the next 3 to 5 years, I believe, and measurably increase not just economic justice, but rights and empowerment for the world's women. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gopalan, for those key closing remarks. So as we draw to a close, I would like to thank Her Majesty Queen Máxima of Netherlands and our panelists, Minister Shri Mulyani, Minister Herrera, Governor Addison, and again, Ms. Gopalan. And of course, I would like to thank you, our audience, for joining us. In closing, I am, and I'm sure you are, really encouraged by the conversation that we've had today. It serves to show the opportunity the pandemic has provided to really use financial inclusion to support recovery and financial equality for women. And it shows we have global leaders, like our panelists, who truly understand the urgency and are committed to taking bold and swift action and to being accountable for their actions. It's important that we all review and figure out what we can do within our own organizations and within our own lives. Reaching Financial Equality for Women, a 10-point action plan, is available on social media channels today. So I encourage you all to go to the social media channels of all our partners today and download the report. You'll find it on the websites of the Better Than Cash Alliance, Women's World Banking, and UNCDF. And you can also visit their websites for more information. Now, as I draw this event to a close, I want to thank you all again for joining us. And again, thank you to our panelists and speakers. And I want to wish you all a very happy International Women's Day. Thank you for joining us.